Good evening, and welcome to this digitally enabled online meeting of the Council of the Municipality of North Perth, held on Monday, June 22nd, 2020. I'm being given the thumbs up that our AV is working. That's promising. Oh, you're not hearing the mayor? Maybe not. Council, can you hear me okay? Just nod if you can hear me. Okay, Councillor Behrens is nodding. Councillor Johnston is nodding, so it looks like we're okay. All right, thank you. We're getting through technologies as always. I'm Mayor Todd Kasenberg, and I'll call the meeting to order. I'll ask the Deputy Clerk to note our starting time for the minutes as 7 p.m. Today's meeting is being streamed live on the Municipality of North Perth YouTube channel and will be available there after the meeting as an archived video. Anyone who is invited to speak will be recorded, and their voice, image, and comments will form part of the live stream. The chair and or the clerk have the discretion and authority at any time to direct the termination or interruption of live streaming. Such direction will only be given in exceptional circumstances where deemed relevant. Circumstances may include instances where the content of debate is considered misleading, defamatory, or potentially inappropriate to be published. Thank you. Welcome to all of those who are joining us via YouTube channel. Welcome, of course, to councillors and staff and our delegate who will participate in this meeting. As usual, a few words are due about our COVID-19 circumstances. I think we need to continue our commitments to the right behaviors to keep us from future problems with COVID-19. The right behaviors include staying 6 feet or 2 meters apart, following of directionality in our stores, for example, the careful creation of social circles or bubbles with one other household as permitted, up to 10. In the gathering circle, these are desired. And I know it certainly isn't popular, but mask wearing in public spaces where physical distancing is compromised requires more of our attention. We have not hit the point yet where the majority of our citizens, when in public spaces, are wearing masks. Our neighboring county has issued an order through their medical officer of health and their warden to this effect. So I urge you, please, when going out into public spaces, bring your mask, have it ready for use, then wear it when appropriate. It shows your concern for others. We approach Canada Day. Our community has led the way to creating a virtual Canada Day that will show that we can be responsible about COVID-19 precautions and yet still have some fun and celebrate our nation's birthday. I invite all to find a way to participate in what has shaped up to be a really remarkable program. A lot of volunteer and staff efforts from Perth County municipalities have gone into Atwood's Virtual Canada Day 2020. And if you haven't yet scored tickets for the Atwood Cafe Pork Chop Barbecue or submitted your entry to the Craft Float Parade, well, tick-tock. I have regrets tonight from Councillor Duncan. Let us move then to item 2.1 on our agenda pertaining to pecuniary interest. For the benefit of those unfamiliar with our council practices, provincial legislation requires councillors with a potential pecuniary or financial interest in any item at the council table to declare this interest and to remove her or himself from discussions and voting on the item. In accordance with recommended protocol at this time, I invite all councillors with pecuniary interest, including those who have declared in writing, to verbally advise the chair in public session and to submit documentation to this effect in writing to the clerk. Councillors are further reminded that should a potential conflict arise during this meeting, they may so declare at any point in the meeting. Councillors, do any of you wish to make a declaration tonight? If so, please indicate through the chat function in our WebEx interface. Seeing no indication of that, let me then turn to our virtual processes. I will, over the course of the evening, be systematically trying to seek consent from various councillors as movers and seconders of the various resolutions and bylaws that will be put before us tonight. I will do this somewhat alphabetically. I might mix it up just for fun. Should a councillor not wish to respond to the request, they may say so, and I will move to the next name on the alphabetical list, or almost alphabetical list. Regarding speaking to our business councillors tonight, will identify themselves through our conferencing technology chat function. The clerk is helping me tonight and maintaining the speaking order from that source. Councillors are allowed on their turn to deliver a primary question or comment and may make one supplemental without intervention from me. We will follow speaking order carefully, and any councillor wishing to have a second say past their first supplemental will have to indicate again and go to the bottom of the list. This is a pretty normal process and is consistent with Robert's Rules of Order. Councillors, I'll remind you, if I can't hear you, I'll let you know. And councillors, you're also further asked to maintain a mood state in the web conference, staff and delegate as well, until I've called upon you for a verbal reaction. Should any of your votes not show up in eScribe, I will call on you when things seem stalled to register a manual vote. At that time, take yourself off mute, answer yes or no or something like that on the motion, and then return to mute. So that brings us to item 2.2 on our agenda. I have a motion before me for the adoption of the agenda for tonight's meeting that reads as follows: that the agenda for tonight's meeting be approved. Why don't we start with Councillor Anstead tonight? Can I call on you to be our mover for that?
Yes, I'll move that.
Thank you. And Councillor Behrens, will you serve as our seconder?
Yes, I will second that.
Thank you. Any discussion or debate, Council? Seeing none, let's have that vote. Slow results trickling in. And we are missing 2 at this stage. Who are we missing? Okay, Councillor Behrens, what say you?
Yes. Mayor Todd, I am in favor.
Thank you. And Councillor Richardson, did you say? Councillor Richardson, what say you?
I'm in favor.
Thank you. So that is carried. Let's move to item 3 on our agenda, the so-called consent agenda. These items are placed on our agenda because they are believed to be non-contentious, yet they require council's recognition and or action. Grouping them expedites our business. However, any councillor wishing to extract an item from the consent agenda for discussion, debate, or individual action may do so. Tonight, we have 4 items on our consent agenda, including the minutes of our last regular council meeting last week. Councillors, do any of you have any desire to extract any of these items for further discussion or action? Please indicate through the chat. Councillor Rothwell.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Todd. I'm wondering, in light of item 3.3, where we were not successful, what is our plan moving forward with that project with the Atwood water storage and water main upgrades for fire protection?
I don't think that I have an answer off the top of my head, but I think I'll redirect to CAO Snell and ask him for some thoughts, preliminary thoughts on that project. Chris, would you like to weigh in on that?
Thank you, Mayor. So we're still waiting for complete confirmation from MTO on when they plan on starting and completing their portion of the Atwood Main Street upgrades. Our hope is that we can still coordinate some sort of opportunity to include the Atwood water main upgrades when that project is moved forward, but this time we're still waiting confirmation of when that will be. But it's our hope that we'll bring this back as a budget item to complete during the Atwood Main Street upgrades that MTO will be doing.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, CEO Snell. Any other questions or requests for action on the consent agenda? Okay, well, I have a resolution for our consideration that consent items 3.1 to 3.4 be received for information in the minutes of the June 15th, 2020 regular council meeting be adopted. Can I call on Councillor Johnston as a mover for that?
Yes, I would move that.
Thank you. And Councillor Richardson, will you be our seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any discussion or debate on that? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And who are we missing? Councillor Richardson, we're having some trouble with your East Flag. What say you?
I'm in favor.
Thank you. Then that is carried. Right. So at this time, we're going to move to agenda item number 4. And we have no public meetings of note tonight, but we do have a delegate visiting with us to share some information with council with regards to Murphy's Ice Cream. Mr. Mike Arendt. Mike, if you're with us, take yourself off mute and join the party.
Hi, good evening, everyone. You can hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Perfect. So thank you for the opportunity this evening to address council. I did send in information. I see that it is brought up on screen here. We're looking to operate Murphy's Ice Cream.
Hey, Mike, sorry, we're struggling a little bit with your audio feed. Can you try maybe to get closer to your microphone or?
I'm going to check to make sure I only have one meeting open because this happened to me the other day.
Oh, that's quite a bit better. Thank you.
Okay, I'm a little bit closer now.
There you go. Keep at it.
Anyways, again, this request is brought before you this evening for a temporary location change for Murphy's Ice Cream to operate at Between the Lines Sports Campus on Roker Road, 275 Roker Road in the town of Listowel. The reason behind it is that our previous location is not allowing us to provide a safe and secure environment for our customers to enjoy our product that we sell, due to the nature of the business that is currently operating out of our previous site. So the reason we're in front of council this evening is to discuss whether or not the opportunity would exist over on Roker Road, and we would work with the owners to ensure that we meet all the requirements for the temporary minor business setup and operation, permits, hydro, water, sewer, etc., for the safe operation of the business, and continue to meet all the requirements from the health department perspective as well, and to keep it looking professional like we have in the past 2 years. The next slide indicates a map of the proposed area of operation, which would be at the edge of the parking lot at 275 Roker Road, Between the Lines campus building. I've also included a picture with respect to traffic cones and delineator posts that we would use to ensure proper social distancing of our customers while they're waiting in line, hopefully while they're waiting in line to purchase our product. That's about it. If you read the letter, if you have any questions.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Arndt. I think we have some information that the staff has been asked to consider in this and present their perspective. So I think I'll call on North Perth planner Sean Yilmaz to weigh in on this, as I understand he's done a little bit of work on this file. Sean, welcome.
Hi, good evening. Yeah, so the only thing I can add to this is that when it came to my desk, basically we were of the opinion that this would be usually done through a temporary use bylaw, but by the sounds of the timing of this, the temporary use bylaw might not be within the time frame. So it was suggested that maybe Mike could speak to council just to express what he wants to do. Thank you.
Okay, so Sean, if it was council's will to advance this forward and to support Mr. Arndt and his business and the creation of jobs that he does for our community, is it your position that a temporary use bylaw is the only vehicle, and is there a concern that we have with regards to timing then, based on what you said?
Sorry, was this question asked?
To you, yes, to you.
Yeah, well, to be completely honest with you, my understanding was I left it at that it should be done through a temporary bylaw. I didn't speak with the applicant myself. It was just I spoke with a staff member who was of the property. The zoning is within the industrial, and there are no provisions to permit this use. And I left it at the fact that it should be done through a temporary use zoning bylaw. But I didn't further that conversation, so I'm not positive where I was left with the other staff member.
Okay, thank you. Clerk Berfelds, did you want to add anything to this from your perspective, from a legislative perspective? Okay, so we'll call first on Councillor Anstedt.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Kasenberg. Through you, Mike, thanks very much for your presentation. I've certainly enjoyed your product many times over the last couple of years. Just looking at the diagram, I didn't see it anywhere, and I'm not sure if it was just left off accidentally or it's not going to be there. Is there any type of patio that's planned there, or any type of picnic tables or anything like that? Thank you.
Hi, Neil, Councillor Anstead, thank you very much. No, at this point, we've had 4 benches.
We're having some audio trouble with you again, Mike. Can you?
Sorry, Councillor Anstead, to answer your question. We won't be having any tables or anything. We may set up the 4 benches that we've used in the past.
Okay. Anything further?
No, I think that's good. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Andreessen is next.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Todd. Actually, my question is more to staff, perhaps. Just wondering if there's any provisions through bylaws around food trucks of sorts here in our municipality that would help assist, Mike and working with his business. So I just wondered if staff could address that, or is that through that temporary bylaw? Thank you.
I'm going to call on Clerk Bearfelds. Just give me a minute so that we're not creating nasty feedback in the audio system. Hold on. That one. And that.
So the municipality does have a transient trader bylaw, and that provides an opportunity for persons like Mr. Arnott to license themselves on a temporary basis. And that what has been done during the past 2 years, as Mr. Arnott has come in and got a license to operate his ice cream shop, and it's been actually then positioned on the commercial lands. So the opportunity is certainly there for him to proceed with another license. I'm quite prepared to do that. It's finding the location and the hold up, as per Sean, having conversation with Chief Building Official Ed Podnowitz. The location of preference tonight is not zoned commercial. And so as staff, Ed left with myself that he did not see that opportunity on that lot, and basically asked Mr. Arnott to bring it to council tonight for their opinion in regards to their policy.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Andreessen, anything further on that one?
No, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Rothwell next.
Thank you, Mayor Todd, and through you, thanks, Mike, for your presentation. You have an excellent business there, and I'm just hopeful that we can find perhaps a location that could be zoned or is already zoned in compliance with our provisions to allow your business to occur. Have you looked at any other properties, Mike, that are zoned to allow your use currently? Have you had those conversations with anyone, including staff?
Basically, the reason I'm looking at this particular location is because I've already, it's the most feasible at this point in time for me as far as reinvesting into a location that will allow me to start business again. My previous location, I've already spent that money, and unfortunately, again, due to the nature of the current business there, it's not allowing me to properly and safely operate the business there. With that being said, I did not really look at any other locations because of being unfamiliar with what might be available. And again, this was offered to me through discussions between Trevor and myself. And again, looking at it from the rational and economical feasibility perspective, that's why I'm trying to approach this location. Thank you.
I understand. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Councillor Seiler.
Thank you, Mayor Todd, and thank you, Mike, for bringing this to us. I'm hoping that we can make this work for you. I know it's ice cream season now, and it's urgent that we try to get you going as soon as we can. I would like to ask Sean if we could do that way he suggested for us on a permit. We can make it happen. And don't know if you know that last week in our council, we have some picnic tables that if you can make use of for sitting down. If you'd like a couple, I think that we could accommodate that if it'd be any interest to you. But if you need a motion, Mayor Todd, I'll move a motion that we move ahead with this and get staff, see if he can get them selling some ice cream. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Seiler. I think our challenge immediately is that this is a bylaw that requires some text that's sort of written like a bylaw, which we didn't have prepared ahead of time for this, that would permit temporary use. My consultation with the clerk staff has indicated that it's been a long time since North Perth has done temporary use bylaw, to at least to their recollection. So we're kind of caught a little bit without the resource that we might need. However, I'm going to ask the clerk here just for opinion. Could we do something over the course of this meeting and reconsider this matter at item 8, bylaws item in our agenda tonight, so that we have a draft of something that we can work with at that hour? So let me just, I'm going to, again, set things up for Pat to respond. Hold on.
So as I'm not necessarily a planner with all the expertise, I'm very hesitant to set myself out there. I have just sent a question to our planner, Sean, asking him about the length of time for temporary bylaw and how we would proceed. We could certainly look at something tonight.
Sorry.
So if Sean would like to make further comment, we can certainly research it as the meeting goes on and bring something back for council's consideration. It is our practice to not ambush council and bring a zoning bylaw or any type of bylaw at the last minute. But if council deems that appropriate, we can certainly work on it. But I would really prefer that the planner make further comment.
Okay, so perhaps we can ask Sean to weigh in here on this matter. What do you think?
So the thing is, a temporary use bylaw is still subject to the Planning Act and the notice requirements. So we still have the notice, and that's where the problem has come in, because by the time we do the public meeting and go through the process, would be probably be well into August. So we were looking at the bylaw to see if there was any opportunity to do something like an accessory use too. Unfortunately, nothing in the industrial zone would really permit that as an accessory use. With regard to the question about food trucks, I'm not aware of any policy in place or regulation in place in North Perth for food trucks. I do know many municipalities do have something like that. Again, the timing of getting something like that implemented for something like this is probably not within the time frame that would be suitable for moving this forward. I think the big thing was, I guess, when my suggestion was to do the temporary use bylaw and the timing of it not really working out, it was determined that maybe the applicant could come and approach council and see if there's anything that council would be willing to do. But from a zoning perspective, I think everything that we need to do would require some sort of public meeting and public notice and timeline from a temporary use standpoint.
So Sean, let me just test my assumptions here. The zoning that would be required for the hosting of the ice cream facility would be commercial. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, typically this is a commercial establishment, it's a food establishment, and basically we would look for properties that would already be able to support that. I have not had the opportunity to speak with Mike actually, but there is potential opportunity to see another location within the municipality that could work. Again, it probably, I don't know if it would be public land or privately owned, but there is always opportunity to approach it from that direction. But in terms of the current property that's being proposed, we're kind of twisted on how much we can do from a planning standpoint.
Yeah, that's my understanding, is that there are enough hurdles that would involve the land planning process that we would be delaying this to a point where it's not economically that useful for the business. Okay, the next question before we see if councillors have other questions. Does the municipality have any commercial land in its stock holding of lands that might be suitable for use for this? I don't know who to ask that question of. CEO Snell, maybe?
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything that is zoned commercially that's available in a short term. Right off the top of my head, I could certainly look, but to the best of my knowledge, any piece that's large enough for this operation that would have access to the sanitary sewers and the things that the applicant's going to need to satisfy public health, I'm not aware of anything.
Thank you. Okay, councillors, any further questions or comments? Any ideas? The clerk is having an intense conversation with the deputy clerk right now, but do you have anyone requesting to speak at this point? Deputy Mayor Callum.
Yes, through you, Mayor Kaysenberg. Yes, my question was answered by Planner Yilmaz. I think that the location here now, it's going to be too long and his season's going to be half over. I'd really like to see this move forward and find him a location, and if we can't, and like Councillor Seiler says, what can we do to help him out at this location? But obviously it is a council decision. So we'll see where this goes from here.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor Kellum. I too would like to see how we can help him. That's why I was asking questions about commercial land in our own land bank. But I guess we're not aware of that at the top of our heads at this point. So, this is tricky. I don't think there's, from what I'm hearing procedurally, there's not an effective way to move along even a temporary use zoning change to the property that's been proposed for this without significant delay because of need for due notice. So we're kind of stuck in a little bit of a notice period problem that is going to essentially suck the season away from Mr. Arendt, which is unfortunate. So council, I'm wondering if our best action here is to encourage the CAO and perhaps the economic development or community development coordinator to try to work with Mr. Arendt and find another solution that will fit with the commercial zoning requirement that he has and get him up and running. Unless you have other ideas, which I'd be happy to entertain, but I'm thinking that at this point our best hope is to push this forward. Chris, any comments?
Obviously, I understand the difficulty Mr. Arnott's in, but I guess at that point we'd be just approaching private land owners, and that's not typically the municipality does. It intervenes in its negotiations between commercial tenants and landlords.
Okay, councillors, any thoughts on what we might, how we might move this along? Anyone, Pat?
Hi, I'm sorry. May I approach council? This is Mike here again.
Yeah, sure, please.
Thank you for listening. I do want to point out that this particular spot that I'm proposing does have ease of access to connections for hydro, water, and sewer, as well, I also want to point out that my trailer is on wheels. It is mobile. However, I do set it up where it's a permanent location for the summer. And again, this is what I'm trying to achieve. Understanding very well that there could very well be a zoning issue here, but yet at the same time, again, it's the most probably the most cost feasible for me to set it up on the land that I am proposing in front of you tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I understand. I think council is on the horns of a dilemma here, though. With regards to the zoning, we don't have an easy ability to just sort of waive the zoning condition without due public notice, and that public notice is going to eat time away from your business season, as I understand it. I can see that the clerk's table, they've been having discussions amongst themselves and seem to be doing some homework here. So they may have some answers a little bit later, but councillors, any of you have suggestions at this point that might be chased by staff through the rest of the meetings so that we can look at this? Because really, if we don't act tonight, if we don't find a solution or an approach tonight, then our next meeting is a couple of weeks away, and that's well into the season and going to defeat Mr. Arndt's goals and defeat some of our goals, because I think we all like ice cream. I certainly can demonstrate that with my portly figure. So let's see if there are any ideas. And it looks like some councillors are reaching out here. Can you tell me what the speaking order is? Okay. Councillor Richardson, did you want to weigh in here, or was this just sort of, because there was a note from you in the chat feature? Councillor Richardson? Okay, you're on mute still, Councillor Richardson. No, we're having a hard time hearing you.
Thank you, Mayor Kasenberg. I think it's vitally important that we do everything that we possibly can, and I just made that note that the CAO, Sean, and Mr. Arndt should speak. I'm just wondering if there'd be some of that zoning that, which would be almost directly across the street from there, if there would be anything there that would be more conducive to this that would have any commercial. I do understand you're sort of commissioning some private landowners, but quite possibly it's in the location that there might be the opportunity just across the for something commercial across the row or in that particular area.
Okay, thank you. So I think the staff is asking if they might have a little bit of time through the course of the rest of our meeting to do a little bit of homework, but they want to hear from all the councillors who wish to speak, and if Mr. Arndt wants to offer some other comments as well, we'll give him that opportunity. So who's on our speaking list, Clerk Fairfelds? Councillor Behrens, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Todd. Certainly, everyone I think around the table would like to help Mike make this work. Unfortunately, it's not going to work with a temporary zoning bylaw because we cannot skirt the planning issues. By the time we get it through, he could probably open, late August, early September. And we simply can't do that because it sets a dangerous precedent. I am not sure about, I know that he needs a hawker and peddler's license, but is there any parking lot that's currently not being used because of that's in the municipality's hands that we could set them up temporarily there? Or because we all know that through the hawkers and peddlers, there's people that set up everywhere to sell their wares. So I understand Mike's position. It's unfortunate we can't negotiate property for him, but at the same time, I agree we should try to do everything possible, but this is really an 11th hour ask. And it would have been easier to deal with, a lot sooner, but that's all hindsight. So I didn't know if there was, I'm going to throw out maybe up at you know, a memorial park in our parking lot type thing or something along that line. I think everyone knows where we just paved the Legion parking lot there. I believe that is still our property. I'm not sure, but something along that lines where, you know, it might serve a better purpose, but I just throw that out. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. That's helpful. I mean, that's the conclusion that I was formulating as well, is that this temporary use bylaw is not going to be a fast route to the goal here. So what are the other options that we might have? So appreciate your comments there. Councillor Rothwell?
Thanks very much, Mayor Todd. I agree with your points as well as the points raised by Councillor Richardson and in part by Councillor Behrens as well. The best thing that we could do is suggest that our CAO, the planner, and Mr. Arndt sit down and review the zonings that are appropriate for this use. And that's frankly the fastest way forward if they already have the hawkers and peddlers license. And then they just come up to an agreement either A, with the municipality, or B, with the private owner. And the private owner agreement is fairly straightforward, more straightforward than council. And they could be open sooner rather than later in that respect. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. So any other councillors wanting to speak? I see that Mr. Arndt might want to speak, and I'm happy to hear him again, but let's let councillors who want to have a say, have their say. Okay, Deputy Mayor Kellum?
Yes, through you, Mayor Todd, to Mike. Does the location have to be in the Listowel ward?
Yes, I would prefer it would.
Sorry, we're having a hard time hearing.
Yeah.
Yes, I would prefer it would be just for the case of logistics.
Okay.
And so on.
Yeah, because there is probably a location near Gownstown that I know is vacant right now that you may be able to work with that individual.
Right. So, you know, we're seeing some suggestions. I think that from what I'm hearing, there's enough consensus around the council table that, you know, the immediate next step, because we'd like to support you, is to speak with the CAO, Planner Yilmaz, perhaps Ms. Couch will be drawn into that as well, with regards to possible, you know, lands that might be available either through the municipal bank or through, you know, private lands that might be available to support your purposes. I see the staff is still working, it seems, behind the scenes here, looking at things. So we might have a little bit more insight later in the meeting from them. Maybe they'll find an angle for us. But all I can say at this point is, failing that, you know, I think council would appreciate you taking the opportunity to meet with the CAO and with Planner Yilmaz at your earliest convenience, because I think it's fair to say we've heard enough of our colleagues say that they'd like to see you supported. It's just we need to figure out how to do that. And in some cases, it may not be us that is where you need the support. You might need it from other sources in the community. So it's probably not the most satisfying answer, but we did brainstorm around this to try to figure out if we could find an easy path. And it's not appearing yet, although staff is still considering next steps here. Anyone on council wish to inject anything further in this before we move forward? Okay. So, Mike, please stay in touch with us. I think, you know, there's that opportunity to get some support from our staff to at least to review some options for you and help you along the way. We'd hate to lose your business in our community at this point. I think it's going to be a summer where people aren't enjoying the pool so much. So as a consequence, they're going to be looking for the ice cream. And we'll pull this back maybe at item 8 in the agenda tonight when we talk about bylaws, or a little bit later. We'll ask staff if anything more has come forward. So yes, thanks, Councillor Johnston, on that. I think we'll move forward then. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Arndt, for joining us. That's going to bring us to item number 5 on our agenda, reports from departments and key staff. And let's begin with item 5.1, reports from the CAO's office. Item 5.1.1 updates council on the status of the community transportation program. It is a work in progress and that has been funded by the province of Ontario. We'll call on CAO Chris Snell to address his report. CAO Snell, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So as per my report, as Council's aware, there's been a lot of work done in preparing the community transportation program, both by the City of Stratford and the County of Perth on the 2 separate programs. The RFP process has concluded and Viago has been a successful proponent. And that's about when COVID hit the province. And as a result, there's been a lot of unknowns thrown into the system and has delayed the launch until September 1st, which was sort of the last deadline that the province would permit. They have since backed off that date, as you can see from the correspondence or from the report, that they are no longer requiring us to start on September 1st. But the really long message of the report is that staff is recommending that we postpone the launch date until we're in more of recovery and people feel comfortable to ride public transit and it becomes a viable system. We think it's misleading to launch a transit system when we're looking to see if this works when the current climate is so difficult. And the second part of that is we're looking for council support, a joint letter from all the partners that would see the program move beyond the 2023 time period. And certainly there's a lot of detail in the report, but I can answer any questions that council may have.
Thanks, CEO Snell. Councillors, those of you who have questions or wish to make first comments about this matter, please indicate through the chat function that you'd like to be on the speaking list, and I'll call for that in a few seconds. Be on that list. Okay, Councillor Andreessen. Councillor Andreessen, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, through you, Mayor Todd. Just wondering a clarification with you, Chris, and that's about just the needs in our community. I know that it's a very difficult time with COVID-19. There's, no argument about that, but is there a need perhaps in the community that we're not sure about if we're not going ahead with the transportation system? Just wondering if there's any thoughts around that.
Chris.
And that's been the difficult question that staff from each of the project participants have asked. I don't think the need's any less in our community today than what it was 6 months ago, but the issues surrounding that are, will people feel comfortable even riding public transit? Can we make public transit even financially viable, which most municipalities are struggling with when we actually can only have as many participants on a bus, for example. Certainly in even in our case with the universities not likely running in the fall, there's that aspect certainly for somewhat for North Perth, but certainly for Stratford. So we're just looking at setting up a system in the worst possible time. Many municipalities are struggling with their transit deficits during COVID, and we just don't want to see a pilot project get off to such a horrendous start that it really has no chance for viability when the provincial money runs out.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anything else from council? Seeing none, I have a resolution for our consideration that reads as follows: that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth accept the report titled Community Transportation Update as Information, and that the Municipality of North Perth sends a joint letter with the City of Stratford, County of Perth, and Town of St. Mary's to the Ministry of Transportation on behalf of Council, formally requesting an extension of the Community Transportation Pilot Project timeline past March 2023. And I call on Councillor Rothwell to serve as a mover for that one.
Yes, I so move and believe it's very appropriate and prudent based on CEO Snell's comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Seiler, will you serve as our seconder?
I will second that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion or debate, Council? Any indication of that, Clerk Fairfax? No? Okay, let's have the vote. And that is carried. Thank you. Next up is item 5.2.1. Council sees again the request addressed through a public meeting held last Monday for a zoning bylaw amendment related to the property at 490 Wellington Street in Listowel, and championed by Patterson Planning Consultants on behalf of the Zeta Group. Zeta Group, thank you. I'll ask North Perth planner Sean Yilmaz to reorient to the requested action. Sean.
Thanks. Good evening again, Mayor Kaysenberg, members of council. Last week, we discussed an application for an amendment to the North Perth bylaw, effectively permitting a semi-detached dwelling to be built on the subject property. Additionally, the applicant has submitted a consent application to the county seeking permission to divide the land, each with one dwelling unit capable of being conveyed separately. In other words, each dwelling unit can be sold for individual home. The proposal had generated some concern from neighbors, which were expressed at last week's public meeting. Council had several questions, which have been addressed by Scott Patterson, the planning consultant for the application. This has been included into the council package, and staff agreed with Mr. Patterson's response. There was some concern regarding the ownership of a portion of the subject lands with the adjacent neighboring property, and the survey plan included with the application illustrates the location of the neighbors' lot lines in relation to the subject property. As Mr. Patterson has noted, the fence encroachment is a civil matter and is technically not related to this application. Also, as Mr. Patterson has noted, the attached survey shows the location of 4 trees on the subject property. They do not appear to be in the proposed building area, and I don't recall any discussion regarding the removal of the trees. Actually, when I spoke with MTE, when we first got this submission, I asked why the building wasn't going to be moved back a little bit further, as there was some room in the rear yard and it was to preserve the trees. Whether that has changed since that conversation, I can't speak to that, but that was the original intent. And as for the questions regarding the suitability of the proposed dwelling type, I have to mention that the property is capable of supporting a single detached dwelling with a second dwelling unit, essentially permitting 2 dwelling units. The only difference is that the proposed semi-detached dwelling would be eligible to be split into 2 individual lots of record, thereby thereby contributing 2 dwellings for home ownership, which can be considered to be more affordable option. Please let me be clear that this is not an affordable housing product, but is considered to be more affordable than, let's say, a single detached dwelling. The proposed development includes appropriate parking, with each dwelling having 2 spaces as required by the North Perth zoning bylaw. And as we are all aware, this proposal will be replacing a building that I think we can all agree will be a benefit to the community. Infill developments like this one are strongly encouraged by provincial policies, as this is considered a very subtle increase to the density. I think we all need to understand that every community is dealing with housing affordability concerns, and policies, as I mentioned, encourage redevelopments like this. In Perth County, we strive to protect our agricultural land, and we need to develop the lands that are allocated to us as efficiently, sustainably and effectively as possible. Redevelopments like the one being proposed will likely continue to surface as older housing stock starts to be replaced. Semi-detached dwellings are nothing to be afraid of and will likely gain more popularity as housing affordability becomes more of an issue for everyone. Staff is still recommending that this council approve the application for a zoning bylaw amendment. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Yilmaz. Council, questions or first comments before we put the resolution on the floor? Councillor Seiler first.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. I took some time and I visited the site, and I understand and I can agree with what we're talking about. My concern is the fence. How much of that fence is on the property?
Mr. Yilmaz, did you want to comment on that?
I unfortunately can't. I haven't been to the property in quite some time, and I was never the one to look at this. This is something that surfaced without me. So I can't speak to that, but the survey shows where the property lines are in relation to it. And again, that would be something that they would need to take up because it does look like some of the fence is on the subject property.
Yeah. It certainly does from the lot schematic there. Other question, Terry, or?
I just, you know, I guess the fence was erected by the neighbor, and it would be nice to have a gentleman's handshake that maybe that if he did take the fence out, that he would replace it on the property line. I don't know if that's possible or not.
That's beyond our scope, I think, Terry. I agree with the premise of civility around these kind of matters, but that's for, it's a civil matter between the two parties.
Okay, thank you. I just thought I would make my comment.
Yeah, thanks. No, you're right. Be nice if this was Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I do agree with you on your last point regarding the fence. It's a civil matter, so we'll leave it there. I do appreciate the fact that this survey was included in this package. It would have been helpful if it was included in the last package because the adjacent property owner made specific reference to it. So I do appreciate the fact that we do have the survey that does show in the specific detail which is necessary to show where the fence is and to show where the trees are. And again, the trees, we can encourage and support the preservation of those trees. But as far as municipality is, staff can let us know if we have the authority that those trees must stay. But I think it's an encouragement and support as opposed to a requirement. Is that true? Through Planner Yilmaz?
Sean, did you want to weigh in on that one?
At this point, again, I would say that we're encouraging it. I don't know anything in place that would necessarily would protect these trees. Although he would need to at least apply for a tree cutting permit, I believe. But again, the conversation I originally had was that these trees were going to be preserved, and I'm not sure why that conversation came in that they were going to be removed. If that was the new plan, I'm not aware of it, but we had asked why the building wasn't going to be pulled back a bit more to meet the rear yard setback, and the answer was to preserve the trees.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Patterson, are you on the line with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, did you want to answer or address anything at this point?
Well, I appreciate the comments that have been provided regarding the fence location. Naturally, it is my position that that's a civil matter to be addressed between the two property owners. The reason the building wasn't pushed back further into the site is to maintain that rear yard setback to the abutting home. The rear yard setback requirement is 7.5 meters, and we're currently at just over 9 meters. We're trying to provide some additional buffer to the house to the east and also try to preserve the trees as well as we can. But if there's any additional questions regarding this project, I'd be happy to try and answer them. But I agree with Mr. Yilmaz's comments so far.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure if you were with us and wanted to make any comments, that you had leave to do so. Okay. Other people wishing to speak, comment at this point in time? Okay, I have a resolution, a bylaw resolution to bring this to the table. Okay, CAO Snell is saying something in chat. I just sort of saw a flash there. Chris, did you want to weigh in?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify that at the present time, we do not have a tree preservation bylaw for trees on private property beyond what the county has for the woodlot or tree cutting bylaw. So at this time, a permit is not required to remove trees on private property of this size. We do encourage tree preservation, and it's something that the municipality strives for, but there's no bylaw or permit required to cut trees on private property.
Great, thank you for the additional information. Okay, so I have a bylaw resolution that I'll read into the record here. With bylaw number 46-2020 being a bylaw to amend the North Perth zoning bylaw number 6-ZB-1999 as amended, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed. And said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I call on Councillor Andreessen to be our mover for that one?
Yes, I'll make that motion, Mayor Todd.
Thank you. Councillor Anstett, will you serve as our seconder?
I'd actually like to pass, Mayor Kasenberg. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Behrens, would you serve as our seconder?
Yes, I will second that motion.
Okay, very good. Discussion and debate now. Opportunity to air on this one. Anyone wishing to speak any further? Fairfelds, anything? I have to admit that I personally, I'll weigh in just briefly. I find this one a really tricky one. Because certainly we had a number of members of the neighborhood express their concerns about this one. At the same time, the opportunity to infill in this lot and to increase the density, which is part of sort of the broad strategy towards housing stock in our community and I think in the county is also compelling. So this has proven to me to be a very interesting decision to make. So I would share that before I cast my vote. Anyone else have anything to say on this one? Okay, let's have the vote. Councillor Seiler, what say you? Sorry? You voted? Okay, good. Then it's carried. Thank you. Let's turn to item 5.3. We have no report indicated from our interim manager of recreation tonight. As item 5.3, lots of goodies happening in that department. Released today, I believe, of information about the Park and Play initiative that is coming up this summer. So councillors may wish to draw their attention to that information. Should they have any questions, reach out to Ms. Gangle. And of course, Canada Day lies ahead, as mentioned earlier in the meeting, and our recreation department has been right in the thick of it and doing some amazing work. So appreciation to that staff again for all that they've been doing. That brings us next to item 5.4. As item 5.4.1, staff has brought forward for council review and approval information pertaining to the renewal of the municipality's general insurance policy and coverage. I'll invite Ms. Hale, our Director of Finance and Treasurer, to address this item. Ms. Hale, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Kasenberg and Council. Our broker, Tim Keel from Keel Dadson Insurance, and our staff, Josh White and myself, have been in the process of working towards a renewal since early February. Of course, as you can appreciate, the insurance industry became a little nervous over the last couple months, and we ended up with a lot more surveys and reporting that was required to complete our renewal. We were not just too sure as to what percentage increase, if any, we would be experiencing. We were led to believe early in January it'd be around the 10%. And as it turned out, it's 9.3. So we do feel like we are pleased that it came in at that rate. We have been in conversation with our local colleagues and have listened to a number of MFOA chats where it seems like renewals in terms of percentages have ranged from like 4 to 40%. So I feel that we do need to at some point do an analysis and look at maybe those municipalities that are similar to ourselves and look at actually the dollars as opposed to just looking at percentage increases because they seem to be all over the map at this time. I think in the past, from time to time, companies would entice a municipality to move over to them by holding the line or with the encouragement of a decrease, and then it does seem to float back and forth. As I know council is aware that that does seem to happen. At this point in time this evening, though, I am bringing a renewal to you from Marsh Canada. JLT had been purchased earlier or late last year, and so therefore our renewal is with them. And we actually have had them covering us for the last little while. And so bringing this to council this evening with a cost of $213,648 for your consideration, as well as giving me the authority to sign the acceptance of municipal insurance program proposal documentation required by Marsh. So I have that for you this evening.
Thank you, Fran. Council, any questions or first comments? Councillor Johnston.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Fran, a question in the letter from Tim Keel, our local one, about the coverage for legal protection and advice. He's saying in the middle of the letter there that could be deleted, saving us $7,750. Have you considered this, or is this something that we should continue with? It's not something I'm familiar with, so just want your opinion on that, Fran.
Through you, Mayor Kasenberg, to Councillor Johnson. I have had a brief discussion with Chris on this, and we weren't able to sort of fetter out through it. So if we were to reduce that after investigating it further, I would bring that back to council for ratification, and then we would have that savings. But at this point in time, we'd like to leave that in until we had a better idea of how far reaching. And at this point in time, we haven't accessed it. So, and we hope not to, but that of course is what insurance is all about. So if we feel in conversation with our Tim Keel, the representative from Keel Dadson, and our CAO that we need to consider it further, by council will be bringing it back. I could bring back the discussion either way, but at this point in time, if it serves your purposes, I'd bring it back if we felt that it was something that we didn't need to have coverage for. We have had it for some time, and as I said, haven't utilized it, but that's where the conversation with Tim came up. But if council would like, we could bring it that discussion back in some detail at a later date.
Thanks, Fran. I would be good with that.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Seiler.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. My last OSM conference, I had conversation with some of the municipalities around us, and they were facing some kind of stuff with the same. It was Jardine then, and they've all leaned to go back. They've gone back to Cowan. When do we put it out to market again to look at where Cowan stands?
Thanks, Kasenberg. Through you to Councillor Seiler. I'd like to bring back that question to you in January. Tim and I have been talking about it and ongoing, but what we thought would be the best approach. And I'm certainly leaning towards going to market again. It's been all over the map. Some have left, which is now marsh, and gone to back to Cowan, so to speak. And yet their structure has changed as well. And so there's been some others that have come the other way. And so there certainly has been some market switching back and forth through a number of the municipalities. It just depends on who you talk to. But in terms of our own process, I would like to bring that to council in January for we'd like to see how COVID plays out in the insurance field and have a better idea of what would be a solid recommendation for council come January. So we will be bringing that back to you at that time.
Thank you, Fran.
Councillor Rothwell.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. Through to Fran. Thanks for your report, Fran. My question is this: in terms of when we do comparisons, could you just talk to us in terms of knowledge about our claims? Because I mean, that's one of the critical issues which makes us either go up or down in part is based on our claims. So Tim didn't specifically say where we sort of fit in terms of our claims, and not going into any details at all, but where the municipality of North Perth sits in the claims situation, and is that in part the reason why we're at that 9.2 as opposed to less or as opposed to more? Thank you.
Through you, Mayor Kasenberg, to Councillor Rothwell. Certainly claims always impact our premiums from year to year. And actually we have had some larger claims than usual in the past couple years. And so we were looking at risk management. You know, what is it that we should be doing, those sorts of things. But you might at some point have a better breakdown of those, and actually a lot of ours are sort of not within our control. We've been defending ourselves as opposed to having to actually pay out a loss. So it still though affects our premiums. If you would like a more knowledgeable discussion about our claims and how they affect our premiums, I would ask that Tim would come back and have a in-camera discussion with you about some of the events that have occurred. But in brief, it has been more of a matter of someone else is doing and us defending ourselves, that we did not have any responsibility for the accident or the situation that occurred, and so our efforts have been more to defend ourselves than to actually pay out in a loss at this point in time. However, no doubt it does affect our claims, or pardon me, our premiums.
Thank you very much, Fran. I appreciate that. I would certainly be interested in having a presentation by Tim on that on a confidential basis. Perhaps other members of council are as well. Thank you.
Will do.
Councillor Barons.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Kasenberg. Through you, Fran, this is probably for you. I'm looking on page 65 of the Marsh report, and just it's talking about the counselors, and it's just a little bit of confusing because it says that we have 24-hour coverage, but then when you go to the very end of the document where it says options for council, it says they can supply quote, if necessary, or if we want that. So just let me find the page number here. I apologize for a minute. It says the quote is available on request for that. So I'm confused as to what we're getting and what we're not getting. And my second question is, for the volunteer insurance, is that our volunteer firefighters, or is that volunteers who from time to time work for us at events and things like that?
Mayor Kasenberg, through you to Councillor Behrens. The volunteers, I'll answer that one quite quickly. That is those that help us from time to time. The volunteer firefighters have their own separate coverage,
Okay.
totally separate from this at this time. And in terms of the coverage for the councillors, I will bring that back in more detail. My understanding is that you are covered, but let me just verify that, because sometimes the wordings sound like double talk to me. And so I'll just have that clarified with Tim tomorrow, and I'll send out an email. But in short, it would be my understanding that councillors are covered.
Okay, if you just want to glance at page 72, it does say that the quote is available on request for 24-hour coverage. So just clarify that. And yes, I would agree with Councillor Rothwell. I would as well like the confidential update on our claims history.
Yes, I will ask Tim to join us to do that at a later date. Actually, if we can wait until after the end of June, it's a nice cutoff time, and bring councillor up to date, all councillors up to date as of that point.
Okay, thank you. We're not seeing anyone else on the questions and comments list, so I have a resolution for our consideration that I'll bring to your attention, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth accept Marsh Canada Limited 2020-2021 Municipal Insurance Program proposal costing $213,648 plus applicable taxes, and that the Director of Finance Treasurer be authorized to sign the acceptance of municipal insurance program proposal documentation per Council's approval. And I call on Councillor Anstead to move that for us.
Yes, I'll move that.
Thank you. And Deputy Mayor Kellum, will you serve as our seconder?
Yes, I will second that motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion or debate? Anything else? Okay, then let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. For item 5.4.2, Council is invited to approve a recommendation to discontinue special provisions introduced as a relief to ratepayers during the COVID-19 pandemic period per the originally intended date of program exit. I'll ask North Perth Director of Finance and Treasurer Frances Hale to bring us up to date on this relief's performance and to address her recommendation.
Thank you, Mayor Kiesenberg, members of council. At this point in time, council has requested that we bring back our policy, that interim policy that we established on accounts receivable back when COVID was took place or started. And one of the ideas that was being presented was that this would be an opportunity for our ratepayers and residents to take a breath while the federal and provincial levels of government were able to catch up with some of the financial stress that would be occurring with the economic shutdown. Our experience has been such that we have very little in the way of non-payment that is occurring. Certainly there has been some slight increase in accounts receivable for all aspects. However, it's been minimal, and actually from year to year it fluctuates probably that much. Anyway, it sort of depends on early springs, late springs, what else is happening in the world, and obviously the pandemic is affecting it as well. So as staff, we are, from what we're basing our recommendation on, is simply that it seems to us that our residents are continuing to pay. They don't want to end up at the end of the year going, oh, I'm going to have to catch up now. So they seem to be trying their best to continue to do so. And therefore, we're suggesting that we start implementing penalty and interest and NSF charges again at the end of July. And that we would start right now to send out notices, just reminding everyone that that is going to happen so that it's not a surprise come the end of July, and that we would actually then let them know that how we would proceed if non-payment was still in place. So through this, we have had new accounts set up for pre-authorized and for online payment. So it has been something that people have been enjoying. Never thought in some cases to do it, and have been able to be set up so they don't forget it. Our neighbors have done everything from not waive anything, not waive any penalties, to leaving it open indefinitely. And I know even St. Mary's is a little more complicated than what the chart I have included here has on it, where they're dealing with taxes in one way and water, sewer in another, and general in another. And so I'd like to at least keep it consistent, that we're doing the same thing on all our accounts receivable. So this evening, we are just asking you to reinforce your policies that you have in place, and that as of August 1st, we would start to charge penalty, interest, and NSF fees again.
Thank you. Questions or first comments, councillors? Seeing no indication of that, I have a resolution for our consideration that reads as follows: that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth endorse the original time period for the interim accounts receivable interest and penalty charges and non-sufficient fee charges, and that regular accounts receivable policies here will resume with regard to interest, penalty, and NSF charges as of August 1st, 2020. Can I call on Deputy Mayor Kellum to be our mover for that?
Yes, I will move that.
Thank you. Councillor Johnston, will you serve as our seconder?
Yes, I would second that.
Thank you. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. That is carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Treasurer Hill. We have no reports indicated from our Manager of Environmental Services as item 5.5. For item 5.6, let's turn to item 5.6.1. For that item, Council is asked to approve a bylaw authorizing the signing of a subdivision agreement related to lands known as the Nickel properties. I will ask, is Lyndon on the line with us tonight? Ask Mr. Couch, our Manager of Operations, to address this matter. Lyndon, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Kasenberg, members of council. In front of you is an agreement with Nickel Properties regarding a subdivision development that's outlined through a couple of drawings that I will go through tonight. The one that's attached to the report was an earlier draft plan, and it outlines the general area, and I'll let council know, for those who aren't familiar with it, that it's the area adjacent to Mitchell Road 23 and Kincaid, and you can see Kincaid extending into the subdivision and then it heading to the south off of Kincaid, and it covers that general area. It's multi-block units as well as single detached units, and it's an aggressive and a large subdivision, and it's actually an exciting development in that area that has been discussed for probably 2 to 3 years. To get into the detail of the report, the subdivision plan itself looks at a build out of about 125 to 135 single detached residential units and 125 to 136 multi-residential, and the majority of those are planned in the first phase of construction, and that's in the south of the property. So if I can just refer to that drawing that is attached in the report, the stage 1 on the left is that multiple residential. I think you can read that. It's there referred to as Block 2. That's to the left, and that's going to be one of the first areas that does develop. If we go beyond that, we'll see that there's been several pieces of review that were done by planning, but also through the municipal engineering office for securities, for easements, and the transfer of roads and blocks, as well as the construction and the construction designations and construction standards that are going to be implemented in the subdivision. So finalizing that, we've done full review. There were additional drawings that were submitted as recently as last Wednesday, I believe, and the clerk's department worked harder than ever to try and provide an agreement that was up to date and outlined the new details. Having said that, the new details don't change the staging and the intention to develop that southern multi-res block first, as well as a lot of large sanitary and water infrastructure heading south, crossing the highway and down to our lift station down by the river. So that's the subdivision agreement. That's the phasing of the work. It's been fully reviewed by all staff. The recommendation, having reviewed the securities that are in place or going to be in place, is that council would sign off on the agreement and allow the developer to move forward. Just as an added item, they are aggressively looking at the project, and we do have a pre-construction meeting planned for Wednesday. If council does accept this and does sign off on it, and we will be discussing the phasing of construction and the details of work start at that time. And that pretty much outlines the report and the intention of the subdivision.
Thanks, Mr. Couch. Councillors, any questions or comments at this point? Councillor Rothwell?
Thanks, Mayor Todd, and through you to Lyndon Couch. I noticed today when you said about aggressive pursuing, there actually is, they're busy moving dirt and so on the site. Was the municipality aware of that? I presume you were. And hopefully they're all in compliance to what is necessary. Thank you.
Mr. Couch?
Yes, preliminary earthworks has started and they've mobilized by bringing equipment on site. There were pre-existing fill piles that I know they said they were intending to do some leveling and some moving of earthworks. Not an issue for us in terms of the general works that are ahead. We did request the pre-construction meeting for this exact reason, so we'll know exactly what they're doing, what their schedule is, and what areas they're going to be developing first, and their intention, especially with the pipe work and infrastructure that's coming up as early as this year.
Other questions or comments? Okay.
Further, Mayor Todd, to my point there, the reason why I raised the point was the fact that some of the works that were being undertaken were on the blocks that I believe are going to be stormwater management and so on. So these were not areas that were under the fill and so on. So I would encourage the municipality to have those discussions further with the subdivider, so that pre-construction meeting should happen before they actually mobilize any forces on the site. And I encourage that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rothwell. Okay, any other indication of question or comment? No? Okay. So I have a resolution, a bylaw resolution for our attention. That bylaw number 73-2020, being a bylaw to authorize the signing of a subdivision agreement with Nickel Properties, Inc., be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed. And that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I call on Councillor Richardson to serve as our mover for that?
So moved.
Thank you. And Councillor Rothwell, will you second that?
Yes, I second. Thank you.
Okay, any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. All right, that brings us to no indication of reports tonight from our fire chief as item 5.7. Brings us to agenda item number 6. For item 6.1, councillors, are there any reports you would like to ask of staff or our committees? To request, of course, the opportunity to speak, please so indicate in the chat feature in the web conferencing tool. Any requests? Nope, the clerk is saying nothing shown there. We don't have any other items of correspondence beyond that already shared for council's special disposition. That brings us to item 8.1 on our agenda, which allows council to consider and enact bylaws. Turning to item 8.1, council is asked to enact bylaw number 87-2020, which authorizes the mayor and clerk to sign an agreement that allows a secondary dwelling unit subject to payment of fees and issuance of permit on the EB property in Elma Ward. Ms. Bearfelds, do you have any comments on this bylaw before we begin? Let me just set up the AV properly here.
Council has, as has been done before, the EBs have applied for a building permit to construct a single detached dwelling. This bylaw tonight allows them to remain living in their existing home and allowing them to build a new one. And as of March 22nd, 2021, it'll be required that the other building will be demolished in order for them then to move forward living in their new home.
Thank you, Bearfelds. Any questions or comments at this point? We're not seeing any indication of that, so let's put this on the table. The bylaw number 87-2020 being a bylaw to authorize the signing of a conditional second dwelling agreement with Stephen and Irene Eby, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed. And this said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Councillor Seiler, can I call on you to move that?
I will move that.
Thank you. And Councillor Andreessen, will you serve as our seconder?
Yes, I'll second that, Mayor Todd.
Thank you. Any discussion or debate, councillors? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. That brings us to agenda item number 9. Unless we want to pick up from the table a staff report pertaining to the matter discussed during our delegation. Maybe we should do that next. Pat, do you have an indication of who would like to speak to that? Is it you? Okay. So Clerk Bearfelds is going to speak to matters pertaining to the delegation that we received in under item 4 of our agenda tonight. So let me set my AV.
Council, as you were moving forward with other business tonight during your meeting, Planner Yilmaz as was having conversation with Mr. Arndt, and they were discussing various other avenues in order for to move forward with the ice cream business. Mr. Arndt at this time would like to speak to council once more. This is in regards to how we may be able to work within Section 8 of the zoning bylaw amendment. Or sort of the zoning bylaw. If council wishes or deems that appropriate, you can allow Mr. Arndt to speak, or if council would prefer that municipal staff and Mr. Arndt work on coming up with a solution, that would be your other option.
Thanks, Clerk Bearfelds. I think there's, I detected at least goodwill around the council table to support Mr. Arndt in his efforts to get this up and running. So, Mr. Arndt, if you'd like to present some more to council, I think you'll have the general consent of council to do so. Please join us.
Thank you for the opportunity. If I could, I have a representative here that would like to speak on my behalf. Is it okay if I allow Trevor Reading to add some comments to this?
So, council, is there anyone opposed to hearing from Mr. Trevor Reading?
Actually, Mayor Todd, it's Councillor Behrens.
Yeah.
Normally, to allow someone to speak during a council meeting, there needs to be a motion passed, especially if this is not the person who appeared in the delegation.
Sure.
I think we still have to follow our procedural rules of order.
Yeah, that's
just
great.
my comment.
Yeah, thank you for that. Clerk Bearfelds, how do you want to proceed? What do we need to do?
Okay, that's I will retract that option then. So just
hold on, Mike.
to add to this.
Mike, hold on just for 1 second. Just getting
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm new here.
Yeah, me relatively too.
If council wishes.
Okay.
That allows this change.
Okay, so council, just so that Mike knows as well. So council, at this point, Deputy Clerk Beer is preparing a possible resolution that we could consider to allow Mr. Reading to be heard. Just bear with us for a few moments while we get that done, I think. Oh, it's just about ready. Okay, the resolution is ready. So let's maybe what I'll do is I'll ask the clerk or deputy clerk to read that into the record, since I don't have a physical copy of it at this point. You want to read that into the record, the proposed resolution? I'm going to have to mute myself for a moment to let that happen. So just give me a second.
So it's North Perth Council would allow for an exemption from the North Perth procedural bylaw to allow Trevor Reading the opportunity to speak in regards to tonight's delegation.
Okay, so council, the clerk has read into the record a draft resolution for our consideration. Let's see if we have support for this. Councillor Anstedt, would you serve as mover for that?
Yes, I would move that.
Thank you. Councillor Behrens, would you second that?
Yes, I would second that.
Thank you. And thanks for your help with that. Okay, any discussion or debate? Let's have that motion. To be crashy, scribe. Okay, so that's carried. Everybody has voted in favor. So at this point then, Mike, just so that you know, you have leave to have Mr. Reading join the meeting and speak on your behalf or on behalf of this application or request of council.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor and council, I thought I better be here to kind of help represent Mike tonight, and I appreciate the opportunity for letting me speak on behalf of Mike here. So we've been trying to figure out a way to get the bylaw to work, and this is totally on a temporary basis, and I think everyone's aware of that. And to me, it could be an accessory to the way we read the bylaws. It could be classified as an accessory to my building, which I'm offering basically the gym and the amenities inside the building in such a manner that basically it's a lot of social time for kids, a lot of social time for seniors. And with everything that's going on in the world today, that is going to be a critical part for the seniors to get back out and for kids to get back out and be active. And in saying that, we could classify it as an accessory because we can go and have social time within our building, doing the physical side of it, but also the social time outside, which we could connect. Basically, someone could go out and grab an ice cream cone, come back into our building and sit and eat it while other people are doing the social aspect of it. That would tie everything all together.
Thanks, Mike. Did you have any comments you wish to make at this point?
At this point, I have no further comments. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I think I'll call on Mr. Yilmaz for some comments at this point. If you have anything to add to the.
Yes, hi there. Sorry, I just looked and I noticed my battery might be dying soon, so I do really apologize if this cuts out. So I had spoken with Mike and Trevor, and I just explained that the existing zoning has a provision that allows for an accessory retail use or an accessory use. Now, the definition of accessory means a use that is naturally and normally incidental, subordinate, and exclusively devoted to supporting the principal use. If, for example, the gym use, for lack of a better term, wanted to have an accessory use outdoors, they could technically do that within the zoning. Whether or not this is considered accessory to the use, in my personal or professional opinion, it's a stretch. But I think I guess the question is whether council wants to agree with that or not.
Thanks, Sean. I don't usually think of ice cream and training as connected items, I have to admit. I hate to say that, but maybe there is a connection. You go and you train first, and then you have the ice cream, or you flip the order. I don't know. Sorry for speculating. Okay, councilors, I'd love to hear you weigh in on this at this point. Anyone wanted to weigh in? Procedurally, Planner Yilmaz, do we have to do anything in particular to allow for an accessory use of this nature? Like, is there anything that council has to actually, they would try this accessory use, and if we didn't like it or it was felt to be in opposition to various that, then it's just the trouble that comes their way.
Well, how this would normally work would be through an application for a building permit. And then it would be deemed whether or not that use is considered accessory. That's how that would usually go. But it needs to be quite clear typically where the accessory use is associated directly with the use that's within the main building. For example, if someone was making ice cream in the building, they could potentially have a retail outlet selling the ice cream. That would be an accessory use.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Councillor Richardson, some comments?
Thank you, Mayor Kasenberg. I'm just wondering if I too think it's a little bit of a stretch. I can appreciate the amount that we're trying to make sure that we can get this to work, and I do wholeheartedly want this to work. I'm just wondering if the existing, like with any of the orders that we currently have in place, make any difference to how we do temporary, because realistically we're probably looking for a 90-day extension or exception to one rule. And I understand setting precedents is a slippery slope because I say that all the time, but I'm just wondering if there's anything like with the current state of affairs that are involved, or with any of the other subgroups that we have going on, if there's any, because we already have made some exceptions to deal with the current situation. I don't know if this is the best avenue, but I do know that a conversation will probably still need to happen with Sean, Planner Ilmez, and CAO Snell, and Mr. Arndt. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. I think it would be quite a stretch for me to try to use the state of emergency authority as head of council to argue that this ice cream facility was essential to the community's recovery from COVID. If I was following that bouncing ball, Matt, good try though. Councillor Rothwell.
Thank you, Mayor Todd, and I appreciate the comments through you from Mike and Trevor as well as Sean. Now, here's the issue. Clearly, as I understand, there's been discussion between Mr. Arndt and North Perth staff regarding whether or not this use is permitted. And I'm going to presume that the answer was no, it's not permitted by the provisions of the bylaw. And at that point, they also looked at the issue of accessory use, perhaps, and decided that no, they were not satisfied that it met that. So they've come to council. Now, council understands that this is council's bylaw, and council can determine how it interprets that bylaw. But as Councillor Richardson said, if we decide to interpret something differently than otherwise we normally would, it is a slippery slope. So here's the conundrum. Either we know what the rules are in terms of the official plan and the zoning bylaw, and if we're going to follow that route and that route alone, well, time is not on the side of opening this business. However, if council is willing to, on a very specific basis, permits this ice cream shop as accessory to the main use, the gym use on the property, for this very specific purpose, for this limited time, that's the only way I can see that this could happen forthwith, as opposed to going through the standard process in the Planning Act for a zoning bylaw amendment, which is a temporary use bylaw for a period of time. So I think someone has to make a motion. I think Councillor Saller made that previously, but whether or not we feel comfortable putting enough wording around that to make sure that it's understood that this is very specific, only for this use, only during this time, to permit this use for this period. Thank you.
Okay, so I asked the clerk an important question, which is, if council did elect to sort of advise that this was, in its belief, accessory to the training facility, how could it be challenged? And you know, the answer is a simple one. That is, it could be challenged on the basis of the zoning bylaw, right? Like, say that they don't believe that that's a use that's right. So the council understands the risk that it would entertain if it made this choice, and the consequence to the business owner if this choice was made. Okay, anyone else queued up to speak? Councillor Behrens, please.
Thank you, Mayor Kasenberg, and I do appreciate the comments from Trevor and Mike. However, I would probably agree more with Councillor Richardson in that I would like to see Mike and possibly the CAO and maybe Ms. Coach have a conversation of where is a better area. Clearly, an ice cream shop is not accessory to a physical fitness place. And I know everybody is trying so hard to make it work, but we have to be conscious that it simply isn't. And you can't call something what it isn't. So I would be happier if we could at least have the conversation on trying to assist in trying to find a different location. We're going to get ourselves into a real conundrum if we start skirting the rules specifically to try to help and do ourselves more damage because we don't know what else may come along. Those are my comments. I'd like to see the conversation on finding a different location occur.
Thanks, Councillor Behrens. Anyone else queued up to speak? I have to admit that as much as I'd like to see this fly, I think our better path is the conversation approach with CAO Snell and Planner Sean if needed, or Kim Couch if needed. I agree. I'm struggling to see how this would be an accessory to the training facility, unless you know the ice cream was embedded with the special protein formulation or something. I think you're pushing it past the point of it being perceived properly. As much as people would like to have this, so I'm not strongly in favor of council taking action along the accessory use matter, but let's leave the floor open. Anyone want to propose an action here at this point for council? Councillors? Okay, Matt Richardson, Councillor Richardson.
Thank you. I would say, in order to make sure that we have the proper conversations with the appropriate people, that we defer this until next meeting. And I know that's not what the applicant is looking for at this point in time. However, I'm just trying to look around the table, and I just want to make sure that we're doing all of our due diligence and that we can we can help this small business and this gentleman out as the best that we possibly can, and at least vet all of those other, like, let's beat all of those other bushes and make sure that we don't have to come back to this decision that we're looking at a week. Well, we're looking at a week, and we're not necessarily looking at going 2 weeks. We're actually not looking at the full going through like the end of August by the time we go through the temporary bylaw route, which was discussed, because I do believe the accessory as listed, that is a significant stretch. And like Councillor Barron said, we don't know what else is coming down the pipe. We have to be very careful of this, but with an abundance of caution, we also want to give an abundance of assistance as well. So I would say that we possibly make sure that those conversations happen and then beat every bush that we possibly can to come up with a viable alternative for this situation.
So a motion that would direct staff to entertain a conversation with the proponents of the ice cream facility is what you favor, Councillor Richardson? Is that what you're saying?
I would say, unless somebody else has something to say about it.
Okay, thank you.
That's what I'm saying now.
I think Deputy Mayor Callum is up next.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mayor Kasenberg. So Mike meets with Sean and Chris or whoever, and deem there are no other locations suitable for this facility, and we go ahead and pass it. What are the consequences to the municipality?
Go ahead and pass. What are you thinking we go ahead and pass, Doug?
Like after they have this meeting and it did come back and we want to move forward with what we are discussing now, even though it's a slippery slope, what are the consequences to the municipality? What do we have liability wise?
So yeah, let's ask CAO Snell to weigh in on that first. You can call on anyone else you want to call it in on that one, Chris.
I mean, certainly liability wise, we wouldn't be exposed to that much risk as far as damage necessarily to somebody. But the problem is that the property owner could be exposed, or we would probably end up in a court challenge on our zoning bylaw, which would cost us either money to defend at that point.
Okay, so that's the most obvious risks from what I heard from your comments, Chris.
Yes, I mean, I guess somebody could argue that there's damages, but I just think the most obvious risk is just defending our zoning bylaw in front of the courts.
Okay. Do you have anything else on that one?
No, that's good. That answers my question. That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Seiler.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. Well, I feel if these discussions are going to be had between these individuals, I think we need to act on it as soon as we can, because waiting till next council meeting is 2 weeks, and it takes time to set this all up. And you're going to be well into July, and it'd be nice to have this thing up and running for Canada Day, in my aspect. So, if there's any way that we can hurry this up, and have something brought back to us before our next meeting and make a decision.
I've asked Clerk Barfelds if she has any thoughts on this. I mean, you know, we could have a special meeting of council, but that seems like a stretch.
I think at this time, what I'm hearing from council is that they're requesting that North Perth staff take the opportunity to sit down and speak with Mr. Arndt and the property owner. And I think it's our best that we can do is see if we can work out something that is in the best for all parties, including the liability of the municipality. If it's something that has to come back to North Perth Council, your next meeting is July 6th, and I'm not sure how I can change that. And otherwise, if it's something that staff feel that we can proceed with causing any concerns for the municipalities, then we would do so.
Thanks, Clerk Fairfields. Generally, I agree. That's the place where we are. I can't foresee, unless the applicant or the proponent finds an alternative solution before the July 6th council meeting, I'm struggling to see any further action before July 6th by this council. Okay. Do we need to test the waters here with a resolution? The council direct staff to be available for a conversation with the proponents of the current solution that we heard in our delegation this evening, and do what is feasible and reasonable in the interests of the municipality and the business. Okay, let's test the waters. So Councillor Johnston, would you move that?
Yes, I would.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Richardson, would you serve as a seconder for that?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any discussion or debate on that one? Anything? Okay, seeing none. Danette, you have available motion? All right, so let's have that vote. Okay, that's carried. All right, that's our path forward. Again, thank you, Mr. Arndt and Mr. Reading, for joining us. We appreciate the insight you've given us on this one. We're hopeful that these discussions will be fruitful. That's probably not the most exciting comfort you're going to get, but know that we all want this to work. It's just there are constraints. Okay, that brings us to item 9 on our agenda. Are there any notices of motion from councillors attending this evening? Anything else? No. Okay, that brings us to item 10. For item 10.1, are there any announcements that would be of benefit to our community or that reflect well on North Perth? At this time, please indicate your desire to share in the chat window. Nothing expressed. Canada Day, it lies ahead. We have a wonderful program. Councillors, I'm looking forward to seeing your wonderful floats. And there's lots of good things happening in the community over this period. Again, appreciate all of the support that all of us are giving to make this this unusual Canada Day happen and give a little bit of source of celebration and festivity to our community at this time. That brings us to item number 11. I don't believe we have anything for closed session of council today, which means that we have nothing to report on from a closed session of council today, which skips us past agenda item number 12. That council, as a mandated good practice, acts near the end of its meeting agenda to confirm all of its actions and business of its meeting through what is called the Confirmatory Bylaw. I have a draft for a Confirmatory Bylaw number 88-2020, which reads as follows. The bylaw number 88-2020 being a bylaw to confirm generally previous actions of the Council of the Municipality of North Perth be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time and be finally passed. The said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I call on Councillor Andreessen to be our mover for that?
Hi, Mayor Todd. Yes, I'll make that motion.
Yes, and Councillor Anstedt, will you serve as our seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you. Any discussion or debate on the confirmatory bylaw draft? Seeing none, let's have that vote. That is carried. So now we have completed the deliberations and taken action and then some on the business that has come before us tonight. Before I read a motion to adjourn, is there any further business? All right. I have a motion which reads as follows. That the council meeting adjourns at 8:55 p.m. to meet again for general council business on Monday, July 6th, 2020 at 7 p.m. Can I call on Councillor Behrens to serve as our mover for that?
Yes, I will move that motion.
Thank you. And Deputy Mayor Kellum, will you second that?
I will second that motion.
Thank you. Let's have that vote. And that is carried. This council will meet again in regular council meeting using digital enabling technologies on Monday, July 6th, 2020. Everyone have a great Canada Day. There's lots to be done. This meeting is adjourned.